The scent of his skin, a mix of cedar and something uniquely him, used to be my favorite fragrance. It mingled with the morning sun, filling our bedroom, our entire life. I remember the dizzying rush of falling in love with Mark. It wasn't a gentle slide. It was a headlong dive into an ocean of certainty. His laughter was a melody I could get lost in. His touch a comfort that settled deep in my bones. We spent hours talking, not just about our day, but about our souls, our deepest fears, our wildest dreams. He was the safe harbor I'd always searched for, the other half of a puzzle I hadn't realized was incomplete. Our wedding day felt less like a beginning and more like a glorious continuation of what was always meant to be. Every shared glance, every whispered secret, every silent understanding built our world, brick by loving brick. I can still recall the afternoon we first met, a rainy Tuesday. I had ducked into a small, bustling coffee shop, seeking refuge from the sudden downpour, my hair plastered to my face, my coat dripping. He was sitting by the window, sketching in a worn, leather-bound notebook, a half-empty mug steaming beside him. He looked up as I stumbled past, and our eyes met. There was an immediate current, a jolt that went straight through me. He offered me the empty chair at his small table, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Looks like you could use a warm spot," he'd said, and his voice was like a cello, deep and comforting. We talked for hours that day, the rain drumming against the window pane, oblivious to the world outside. We discovered a shared love for obscure jazz, for old black and white films, for the quiet solitude of early morning walks. It felt like finding a piece of myself I never knew was missing. He proposed under a sky full of stars on a quiet beach during a spontaneous weekend getaway. He knelt, not grandly, but intimately, just for me, the waves whispering their ancient secrets in the background. His voice had cracked slightly as he asked, "Will you make my forever yours?" And my yes was barely a breath, choked with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Our wedding was a small affair, intimate and filled with the warmth of close friends and family, but to me, it felt like the grandest celebration on earth. Every detail, from the wildflowers in my bouquet to the jazz band we'd insisted on, was a testament to our shared dreams. We danced until our feet ached, his hand firm in mine, his eyes never leaving my face. That night, wrapped in his arms, I truly believed in happily ever after. The early years of our marriage were a tapestry woven with threads of laughter, shared ambitions, and unwavering support. We learned to navigate the small quirks, the endearing habits, the occasional disagreements that are part of building a life together. He'd leave his socks on the floor, and I'd grumble good-naturedly as I picked them up. I'd spend hours fussing over a meal, and he'd declare it the best thing he'd ever tasted, even if it was slightly burnt. We were a team, a unit, facing the world hand in hand. We talked about children, about a little house with a garden, about growing old together, rocking on a porch swing, still holding hands. These weren't just dreams, they were blueprints for our shared future, drawn with boundless love and trust. The first crack wasn't a thunderclap, but a whisper, barely audible. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. He began staying later at work, not just once or twice, but with increasing frequency. His explanations were always plausible. A big project, a demanding client, a new deadline. I'd nod, trying to be understanding, bringing him coffee or a late dinner to the office, genuinely concerned about his stress. But the uneasy feeling persisted. The laughter lines around his eyes, once so prominent, seemed to smooth out, replaced by a weary detachment. Our Friday night movie dates, a cherished ritual, started to be canceled. "Too tired," he'd say, collapsing onto the couch, scrolling through his phone, his attention elsewhere. One evening, I tried to rekindle the spark. I cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, put on the jazz album we'd listened to on our first date. He arrived home late, distracted. He barely touched his food, his eyes glued to his phone screen, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips that wasn't for me. "Everything all right, Mark?" I'd asked, my voice a little too quiet, a little too hopeful. He'd looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Oh, yeah, just a lot going on at work. You know." He gestured vaguely, then immediately returned to his screen. That night, as I cleared the untouched food, a cold knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't just a busy day. It felt like he was pulling away, piece by painful piece. Then came the first real quarrel, a sharp, jarring note in our harmonious life. It was our 5th anniversary. I had planned a surprise weekend trip to the coast, revisiting the spot where he'd proposed. I'd booked the same quaint inn, packed his favorite snacks, even bought a small, thoughtful gift. I'd been buzzing with excitement all week. When I presented him with the tickets and the itinerary, expecting delight, he looked at them with a blank expression. "Oh, right, anniversary," he'd mumbled. Then, "Look, I can't. I have that presentation Monday. I really need the weekend to prepare." My heart sank, a heavy stone in my chest. "But it's our anniversary, Mark. I planned this for weeks. You knew." His jaw tightened. "I'm busy, okay? Can't you just understand that? Some things are more important than nostalgic trips." The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. We didn't yell. We didn't shout. But the silence that followed was louder than any scream, filled with my unexpressed hurt and his baffling indifference. I ended up going alone, walking along the same beach, the stars feeling cold and mocking, the sound of the waves a lonely dirge. The cracks grew wider, more frequent. His explanations became flimsier, his dismissiveness more pronounced. He started forgetting things. My birthday, our ritual of morning coffee together, promises he'd made to help with household tasks. When I tried to talk to him about it, to express my growing unhappiness, he'd either shut down, retreating behind a wall of silence, or turn it back on me. "You're being overly sensitive, Anna," he'd said one evening after I tearfully confessed how lonely I felt in our own home. "I'm working hard for us. Can't you see that? You're just making problems where there aren't any." His tone was exasperated, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. I felt dismissed, my feelings invalidated, and a knot of resentment began to tighten in my chest. Another time, during a family gathering, he publicly contradicted a story I was telling, something small, about our first date. He corrected me on a trivial detail with a smirk, then turned to our relatives and said, "She always exaggerates, bless her heart." The casual humiliation stung, a public brush-off that made me shrink into myself. Later, I confronted him, tears welling in my eyes. "Why did you do that, Mark? You made me look foolish." He'd sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Anna, it was just a joke. You need to lighten up. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal to me. It felt like he was chipping away at my confidence, dismantling me bit by bit. His phone, once an occasional distraction, became an impenetrable fortress. He'd take it with him everywhere, to the bathroom, even when he went to get a glass of water. He'd angle the screen away from me, and if I walked into the room, he'd quickly lock it or switch apps. My intuition screamed at me, a relentless, nagging voice in the back of my mind. I tried to ignore it, to trust, to believe in the man I married. but the signs became too blatant to deny. He started dressing differently. New cologne, a subtle change in his haircut. He was showering often, sometimes twice a day. He was glowing, a vibrancy I hadn't seen in him for years. And it wasn't for me. Then came the shattering. It was a Tuesday, a day that will forever be stained black in my memory. He had rushed out that morning, claiming an early meeting, leaving his laptop open on the kitchen counter, something he never did. A notification popped up on the screen, a message from an unfamiliar number. Curiosity, that dangerous serpent, coiled around me. Against every instinct, against the last vestiges of hope clinging to my heart, I clicked it open. The messages. They weren't just a fleeting flirtation, a drunken mistake. They were a long, detailed narrative of a parallel life he was living, vibrant and full, with her. Pet names I'd thought were ours alone. Inside jokes that mirrored our own private language. Plans for trips, discussions about future homes, complaints about me, about the wife who didn't understand him, who was demanding and needy. Each word was a sharpened blade, tearing through my illusions, severing my last thread of sanity. I saw photos of them together, laughing, holding hands, her head resting on his shoulder, a look of profound tenderness on his face that he hadn't shown me in years. It wasn't just a physical betrayal, it was an emotional one, a complete transfer of the intimacy that had once been the bedrock of our existence. He had built another life, a perfect, gleaming new world, while mine was slowly, agonizingly decaying around me. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp tearing through my chest. The world went silent, then roared back with the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. A wave of nausea hit me, violent and sudden, and I stumbled to the sink, dry heaving, tears streaming down my face. The man I loved, the man I had given everything to, my youth, my dreams, my very being, had meticulously, cruelly been building a betrayal behind my back. It wasn't an act of passion. It was a deliberate, sustained deception woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. He'd smiled at me over breakfast, kissed me goodbye, all while carrying the weight of this secret, this other woman, this vibrant, deceitful existence. The pain wasn't just heartbreak. It was a visceral tearing, as if someone had ripped my very essence in two. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat, hot and acrid. I crumbled to the floor, the cold tile a stark contrast to the burning inferno inside me, gasping for air, clutching at the fabric of our life, now revealed as nothing more than a meticulously crafted lie. The photos, the messages, they burned into my retinas, searing themselves into my memory, an indelible mark of his treachery. I cried until my throat was raw, until my eyes were swollen shut, until there were no more tears left to shed, only a vast, echoing emptiness. When he finally came home that evening, I was a hollow shell. The laptop was closed, a silent accuser on the counter. He walked in, humming a cheerful tune, oblivious. He saw my face, saw the wreckage of my composure, and his smile faltered. "Anna, what's wrong?" he asked, feigning concern. His hypocrisy was a fresh wound. I couldn't speak, could only point to the laptop, my hand trembling uncontrollably. His eyes followed my gaze, then widened as he saw the closed lid. A flicker of panic crossed his face, quickly replaced by a resigned sigh. "So, you know," he said, his voice strangely calm, almost bored. That coolness, that utter lack of remorse, solidified the ice in my veins. There were no apologies, no desperate pleas for forgiveness, no tears. Just a quiet, almost casual admission of guilt. "It's been going on for a while," he continued, as if discussing the weather. "Things just weren't working between us anymore. She understands me. She gets me." His words hit me like physical blows. "Not working?" I finally choked out, my voice hoarse, unrecognizable. "You didn't talk to me. You lied to me. You built an entire other life while I was trying to fix this." He sighed again, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of impatience. "Look, Anna, I know you're upset, but it was over. We just weren't compatible anymore. This is better for both of us." Better for him, perhaps. Better for the woman he was now openly admitting to. But for me? My life had just imploded. The next few weeks were a blur of numb existence. The silence in the house was deafening, amplified by the absence of his presence, now officially banished to a friend's couch. Every object, every corner of our once shared home screamed of memories, of promises broken. I walked around in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping. Friends tried to reach out, offering comfort, but their words felt hollow, inadequate against the gaping wound in my soul. I was ashamed, humiliated, and utterly alone. Then came the lawyers, the cold, sterile language of divorce. Assets, liabilities, marital property, our shared life reduced to a spreadsheet. He presented a facade of calm reasonableness, discussing terms, making demands, as if we were business partners dissolving a failed venture. He fought for certain possessions, certain financial advantages, with a surprising ruthlessness. He seemed to care more about the expensive painting in the living room than the decade of my life he had just annihilated. He walked away from the final decree with a new lightness in his step, seemingly unscathed into his new, pristine life. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. He was already living with her. They were planning a future, buying a new house. He was thriving, effortlessly shedding the burden of our shared past. But I was left with the debris of mine, the agonizing shards of a broken heart, and a simmering rage that refused to be extinguished. It wasn't just the pain, it was the injustice, the sheer audacity of his betrayal, followed by his seamless transition to happiness, while I was left bleeding. It festered, a venomous seed planted deep within me, watered by every tear, every sleepless night, every hollow laugh I heard echoing from his new life. I watched him from a distance, saw his new happiness, his effortless transition, and a chilling thought began to take root. He thought he could just discard me, erase me from his history. He thought wrong. He had no idea the kind of fire he had stoked. He had no idea what a woman scorned, a woman broken, could become. The Anna he knew, the one who loved him unconditionally, was dead. In her place, a colder, harder version of myself was emerging, forged in the crucible of his deceit. I started researching, learning, planning, not with wild abandon, but with a quiet, meticulous precision. Every moment of his carelessness, every slight, every lie became a building block for something else. My revenge wouldn't be loud or destructive in a physical sense. It would be an unraveling, a slow, meticulous dismantling of the perfect new life he so readily embraced. He had taken my future, my sense of self, my trust. Now it was my turn to take something from him. Not just an eye for an eye, but an absolute rebalancing. He would understand what it truly meant to lose everything, just as I had. This wasn't about hate anymore. It was about balance. And the scales, my dear ex-husband, were about to tip, irrevocably. He was about to learn the true cost of his betrayal.